Our scripture today, there's two of them. One is from Genesis, first chapter. But the earth became chaos, and emptiness and darkness came over the face of the deep. Yet the Spirit of God was brooding over the surface of the waters. And also from John, third chapter. A certain Pharisee named Nicodemus, member of the Sanhedrin, came to Jesus at night. "Rabbi," he said, "we know you're a teacher come from God, for no one can perform the signs and wonders you do unless by the power of God." Jesus gave Nicodemus this answer: "The truth of the matter is, unless one is born from above, one cannot see the kingdom of God." Nicodemus said, "How can an adult be born a second time? I can't go back into my mother's womb and be born again." Jesus replied, "The truth of the matter is, no one can enter God's kingdom without being born of water and the Spirit. What is born of the flesh is flesh. What is born of the Spirit is spirit. So don't be surprised when I tell you that you must be born from above. The wind blows where it will. You hear the sound it makes, but you don't know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit." Words from our history for our present day consideration.
It's sometimes hard to remember that Jesus didn't come to make us religious, that Jesus came to make us fully alive. We can forget that with religion because almost inevitably religion becomes an end in itself, which defeats the purpose. I'm always very humbled by the fact, or humbled, whichever you prefer, by the fact that Jesus used clergy almost always as a bad example for the spiritual life. And I don't know about you, but in my experience, that's pretty accurate a lot of the time. Nicodemus, that word means conqueror of the people, ruler of the people. So it's somebody who is a person privileged. They're a person that religion has been very good to them financially, socially. And they've lost the idea that religion is to bring people to life, to joy, to responsibility for their own lives. So Jesus is going to talk about being born again. Our translation that we use is really good on gender issues. It's often horrible on theological issues. The word that's translated as being born from above or being born again is the same word. You can't really tell just looking at the word. Greek is obviously different than ours. It's one word, not two words. So whether it's talking about being born again in the sense of like reincarnation, where that means being born like from a higher place, whether it means being transformed and renewed, all that's potential within that word. And again, the clergy is the bad example. So when Jesus talks about being born again, the clergy person says, how is that even possible? Because for this person, religion is like a philosophy. And everything has to be consistent. Poetry isn't like that. Life is not like that. We almost have to choose between having a philosophical meaning of life and a meaningful life, because they require a different depth. To have a consistent meaning of life, I've got to reduce everything to my words, to language. To have a meaningful life, I have to let go of language sometimes. Because some of the most important things in life you can't really say in logic. In the West, this side of the planet, religion is almost completely reduced to nouns. Most people think whether you believe in God or not is the most important question. But the sacred is deeper than whatever idea you and I have of it. It's not there because we believe in it. It's not there because we don't believe in it. It's a depth of experience, a depth of life and living. What would your religion be like if you didn't just have nouns for the sacred, but also verbs? Lots of religions around the world, including in Judaism, where it talks about the burning bush and God's name is given, that's a verb, not a noun. Sometimes you can't think about life. You have to just live it and give yourself to it. Sometimes it takes verbs. Other times it takes adverbs. Like things aren't working the way that you want to, but there's a quality to your life. An adverbial quality to it. Or it's adjectives. It's like the person isn't the perfect example of what you're thinking of, but they're close enough for you to understand what the sacred means. So one of the things that I'm trying to do every week is to get deeper than the religion that many people were given in Sunday school, to something that's going to work in your real life. When religion only works at church, that's not a real good batting average for the rest of your life. So I think our passage today invites us to go deeper into the kind of profound living that Jesus would like us to have. And if we only knew that we're worthy of that, we would want it too. Much, much more than religion. Religion is the bridge. This life, this rich, full life, is what we're looking for. Religion is the container. This life, rich life, is the flame that we're trying to maintain. I want to start with the question, what does it mean to call something sacred? If you can't tell, this is going to be a weird sermon. Unlike the rest of my sermons. About the best definition of sacred that I've ever heard came from Starhawk, who's Wiccan. That's a witch. So if that freaks you out, we have our sacred cotton balls you can put in your ears and protect your tender soul. Now, Starhawk is a remarkable spiritual figure, and she's a really helpful way to step out of some of the constraints of Western patriarchal religion. She says, the earth is a living, conscious being. In company with cultures of many different times and places, we name these things as sacred: air, fire, water, and earth. Whether we see them as the breath, energy, blood, body of the mother, or as the blessed gifts of Creator, or as the symbols of an interconnected system that sustains life, we know that nothing can live without them. To call these things sacred is to say they have a value beyond their usefulness to human ends, that they themselves become the standards by which our acts, our economics, our laws, our purposes must be judged. No one has the right to appropriate them or profit from them at the expense of others. Any government that fails to protect them forfeits its legitimacy. And if you're from Texas, you know what that's like. So instead of taking somebody else's vision of what's sacred, including mine, right? Jesus has warned you that when you listen to me, be careful, right? Because anybody who silences your own reason, your own heart, has tricked you and cheated you. The real teacher leads you to your own heart, to your own mind. So always come here with a shaker of salt and put that on anything I ever say. Because I'm trying to lead to life, but that can be tricky too. The first slide I would like to look at today, could we go to the first slide? That word for Spirit, Holy Spirit. If you spoke the language that Jesus was speaking in, either Hebrew or Aramaic, probably Aramaic, or Greek that this is translated to, either way, when you looked at that word, one of the ways you would understand it is not spirit like the theological concept, but as breath. That word is breath, it is wind, and then spirit is the kind of third implication of it. Confucius said, what has to be taught first is the breath. Why do you think that breath is used as the word for spirit all over the world? In many Eastern religions, they explain it. That breath is like the golden key to the spiritual life. When you slow your breath down and make it gentle, the rest of you kind of follows that. So even if you can't think your way out of this tension, fear, anxiety, that by slowing your breath down, making it gentle, your body will usually go along with that. Now think about this. Breath is the first thing we do when we're born. It's one of the last things we do before we die. And yet we're not taught to understand it at all. We just kind of disregard it. There have been spiritual teachers all through time and all over the world that have used that as a symbol of whatever the sacred is. If we're talking about being born again, one of the metaphors for that is your breath, because you're letting go of the past and taking in the new. You're letting go of old air and taking in new air. And it's not a one-time event. What if instead of thinking God is this person hiding from you, and let's face it, God's a really good hider. What if instead it's something that you're moving through? What if it's your source? What if it's what's sustaining you? What if your breath is an expression of the sacred? And you don't have to question that. That just as life is this kind of pulse going in, going out, your breath is the anchor that balances the going in, the going out. I think one way to understand this passage is that something sacred is happening when you breathe. And it's a kind of constant rebirth. We're very afraid of transformation. We want to be static, permanent beings in an evolving universe, and we just don't think very far down the road of how unfortunate that would be. To be static in a changing universe would be hell. It would be to be left behind. But it's hard to find the courage to let go of the past and to go into this transformation. Maybe our breath is the starting place. Maybe we begin to understand what that word spirit means when we pay attention to our breath. So one way the word is translated is breath. Another way that it's translated is wind. And again, if you spoke Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek, you wouldn't see the word spirit there primarily. You'd see the word breath or wind. And you see that in many of the stories. Pentecost, it's a wind. That some of the prophets, when they're opening themselves to guidance, it's a wind that comes in. What if religion is talking about reality itself? And not some beliefs about someplace else or somebody else? What if the purpose of religion is to find your own heart and to live from that place? What if following your own breath inspired you to realize, inspiring, see there's a word for breathing, to understand that wind is a kind of common breath. But when you breathe in, you're breathing something that a plant gave you, right? Your breath, oxygen, a lot of that's a gift of the plants. And when you exhale, you're giving a gift back. Even the wind that sweeps across the ocean has lunar beginnings. So as we begin with our breath, it begins to open up to life, to existence, but it's real. It's real. It's the heart of our experience. It's not something we were being asked to believe that some preacher says. Thank God. You're not being asked to believe what a preacher says. You're being invited to go deeper into your own heart, your own experience. Part of being born again, or born from above, is to enter into the common life. Hopefully without losing your own personal life. But to realize that when you ask the question, why is this happening to me? There's a little bit of imbalance in the question. Because if you live in your common life, you realize it isn't just happening to you. Whatever happens can become a gift for the rest of the world. Not if I think I'm the center of things. If I think I'm the center of things, and that's very understandable. That's what it looks like to me. That I'm the center, and y'all get to be the furniture in my, But I suspect you're looking at it the same way. So what if we all began to share life? And to realize that we share breath, that we're part of an interconnectedness that isn't philosophical. It's biological and cosmic. What if what is being said here is that when we share breath, it's a sacred moment because we're being born into what is a larger life. The last insight that I have, you're free to come up with your own insights in addition to that, or instead of that. But when Jesus says you have to be born of water and of spirit. Now, you know the way the church has understood that is you've got to be baptized by us. Baptism is a symbol of God's grace, but it's got to come through a clergy person. Does that seem a little suspicious? And again, what if instead of seeing the word spirit, you saw the word breath or wind? I suspect what a Hebrew speaker would think of was the beginning of Genesis, when the breath of God is sweeping across the water. What if you're being called to is the creative core of your own being? What if the word spirit was more like the German word for like school spirit, something like that? Teen spirit? What if it's a quality of living and a creativity? Whether your source is cosmic or whether it's a being, whether it's being or a being, you are an expression of a creative principle. And when you are creative, something sacred happens. Now, the way Jesus says it is that the wind goes wherever it wants to go. And so it is with people of the Spirit. And again, it's playing off these words here. But anybody who's ever been creative realizes that creativity takes you in places you don't necessarily want to go. That the life within you has different plans than the life that you might design. An asterisk here is you can't just follow this stuff. If you've got children, you can't join the circus yet. Right? You can't just follow the impulse. But keeping your heart open means staying as close to that as you can. There are people who play instruments, lose an arm, and they're able to get as close as they possibly can to it. There are people who dance and they have a stroke or just get old, and they do movement from chairs. Because it's not the result that's important, it's the spirit. It's that feeling of creativity. In the East, they call it yoga. It's your art. The greatest masterpiece you have to give the world is your life. And in some ways, the harder things are, the more beautiful you can make that as a gift for other people. Think of your own heroes in life and how many of them were cheated in life. It was too short, too unfair. And yet through that, they refused to be less than human. And they lived out with a beauty and a dignity that gives inspiration to us all. So the third insight that I get from this text is there's something sacred happens whenever you're creative. It's almost like you're being born again out of whatever that creative principle of the universe is. And to realize that that has a power to it and a greatness to it that tells us what is valuable. Anybody that tells you to measure your own art does not understand life. That creativity tells you what value is. So one of the things we should never forget when we take up Jesus or Buddha or any other great teacher is that the point is to become alive, fully and completely alive. All of your mind, all of your heart, all of your strength. Religion is the trainer wheels. It's the bridge, it's the helpful porch to get to fullness, but it's never the destination. So the kind of 3 steps that I say, oh, and by the way, always the warning about clergy, that religious people can put you in a trance before you even know it. Religious jargon puts you in a trance before you even know it. Sometimes the people that are best at speaking theologically are the worst at speaking about life and love and emotion. So to trust that breath within you, to realize that simply that moment of becoming aware of your breath, of making it gentle, making it kind, is the beginning of changing the whole world. And that when that breath is recognized as a common breath, that you're breathing in the exhalation of other beings and you're breathing out what will be their inhalation. To realize that life is one whole, that we're cells in a common body, never alone, never worthless, that we always have a tremendous gift to give one another when we're true to that. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is that the creative principle that gives you birth is alive within your body, with your imagination. You're an expression of an ancient wisdom. And your art can take you places that will make you a gift to the whole world. That your life can be your greatest work of art. To listen to the calling of what Jesus called spirit, you can call it whatever you want to, and go wherever it calls you. Well, that's my understanding of the text. We invite you now to a moment where you can reflect on how you would understand these words.